Welcome to another episode of Trouble Performing, a series of salon-style conversations around issues in contemporary live art practice, hosted by Pulsar, that's Tif Robinette and Ian Deleón. This episode was recorded on January 28th, 2017, in Brooklyn, New York, and we were joined by Mara Catalan, Mitchell Murdock, Olivia Coffey, Daniella Lagaccia, Mike and Amy of Wild Torus, Kalan, Sherrard, and Jess Kramer. Our discussions focused largely on the topic of trigger warnings and how these could or should be more widely incorporated into performance practices. And in particular, we spent a fair amount of time discussing the controversy around a recent piece from back in December, in which audience members reacted vehemently to a performance some categorized as out of touch or even flat out racially insensitive. Join us as we delve once again into the nuances and intricacies of the vibrant performance art community here in New York City and beyond.
Okay. It's so funny.
So, nobody go for the salt for the next certain amount of time. It's already recording, but no need to change your attitude. We'll just ease into it. We usually open up with a couple of quotes to kind of establish the general topic of discussion. As you probably saw from the promo we put out for the thing, if you saw it, we're interested in talking more generally than specifically, or just not focusing on any one performance tonight, because a lot of stuff has already been said online, but maybe resolve some of those lingering questions from that performance by talking about a couple other things, and just talking in generally about performance and performances that trigger and people that have triggers, and how both of those parties should approach feeling or presenting a certain way. Audience, artist, and the interrelationships between both of them. So read a couple of things, and then maybe pass around the phone to take a look at one image in particular, to open up the conversation. So if you'd like attribution, I could give you these later, but I'm just going to read the quotes themselves, not necessarily who they're from. So opening it up with, we need to develop a way to have this conversation that doesn't make some people feel condemned. Are the artists and all of us interested in growing and learning from this experience, or do we all want to keep the moral high ground? Some say there's a criminal touch to art. Telling people they're racist, sexist, and xenophobic is going to get you exactly nowhere, someone says. It's such a threatening message. One of the things we know from social psychology is when people feel threatened, they can't change, they can't listen. And then another perspective, white people in North America live in a social environment that protects and insulates them from race-based stress. This insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort while at the same time lowering the ability to tolerate racial stress, leading to what this person refers to as white fragility, a state in which even a minimal amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves like anger, fear, and guilt. And these behaviors, in turn, function to reinstate white racial equilibrium. And then this image. Some of you might remember this from 2015 when it was making the rounds. But let me pass it around. So it's an image of a naked black male hoisting up a figure from a noose in a white KKK outfit. And it's not totally apparent from the photograph, but the artist who made it is this 30-something-year-old white man from Jacksonville, Florida, which was surprising to me when I looked this up. But, that was sort of the opening preamble. So, if anybody would like to jump in to talk about this image in particular or something else that was just said and relate it to something they've seen, or what?
I'm not sure I've seen that image before, but it definitely made an impact on me just seeing it right now. And yeah, honestly, it is surprising knowing that a white artist created that. But I think that is a good use of like violent and like scary imagery, just because it's flipping the script, and that's the entire purpose of the scene that is created in that image, is that it's the reversal of roles. And so we see the robes used, the naked figure used, but the power dynamic is flipped completely. So you're not being confronted with an image of the robes being used to intimidate. It's actually the people who would align themselves with the robes who would be intimidated. So I think that's successful to me. I can understand what their intention is and their statement is without any further elaboration. Although I'd like to hear more about the process, of course.
Oh, of that photo?
Yeah. I'd like to know more about it. But I
don't know too much about it, except that it's from a series called Historical Fiction.
A series, yeah. But I don't need to hear any more about it to see what the point is, Mm-hmm.
I wonder, what if that piece had been like a performance? And what if prior to the image that we see here as a photograph, there had been a series of actions and movements that maybe started out with the Klan figure, like what that would have, what that would do to our read of the final image.
Something that I think we all love about performance is that when you're present with the artist in the exact moment, that work can be much more impactful than when you're seeing it static, flat, or through your phone. Mm-hmm. So I could imagine that being like scary, like triggering to some, to the point of like they wouldn't want to be there, even if they wouldn't want to stick around to see what happens next. Mm-hmm. But yeah, good question.
Well, we have certain cultural symbolism that affects us very emotionally. And sometimes when you're affected emotionally, it's very hard to see like a rational, like outside picture, because when you feel emotion, it is very much in that moment. And it is reactionary. Emotion is always reactionary. Mm-hmm. And cultural symbolism is always a reactionary thing that you have with the audience, right? So when you're making work that speaks about something that is, or uses symbolism of something that is a part of culture and then does make people feel upset, right? It's like things that we do not like about our culture in a very real, visceral, like almost like to the point of, like pure emotion, pure raw emotional way. It can create a very powerful image. It can create a powerful interaction or performance. But how do we like make something like that as performers? Most people around this table perform, right? And or like make photographs or make imagery. So how do we like make something that is impactful? And then how do we balance that with being sensitive towards the reading of that from audience? Because that, for me, that is a responsibility of ourselves. We are responsible for the reactions that we have in the audience, sometimes which are good, sometimes which are not bad, but powerfully impactful in a reminding people of their own failings, right? Or our own failings as a culture.
Is there a way to any way to predict that before you're doing it? So to a certain way you think, okay, you can predict certain reactions and you can say, okay, that's, but at the same time you also, until it happens, right, there's no real way to also,
I think you can know and also not know.
Yeah.
I wrote in the comment for your Instagrams that you can't, as an artist, you can't control how people are going to react to your work. That's... And it's assuming you can control other people's behavior, which you can't.
Well, but we're not talking about control. We're talking about anticipating and strategically, reflecting on that.
Do you need to control? I mean, as an artist, don't you have the right to question and to take those boundaries where usually in society, where especially in America, where people are subject to a lot of constraints and what's right, what's wrong, what you can say, what's politically, that's very different. I think what is in certain, what we saw maybe in New York, Miami, but in different states, even in America. But it's also very different if you're in Spain, or if you're in Europe, or if you're in Asia. Yeah. How you perform or how you provoke, as an artist that you guys are. Aren't you the people that actually can trespass those boundaries to make people uncomfortable and to question?
As artists, artists, who else is doing it?
Well, so something
besides activists, who else is doing it other than artists?
Something that crystallized for me in this whole situation, a sort of slogan that I've been repeating is that it's the onus of culture workers and culture producers to make sure that our work cannot be used to justify genocide, basically. So I don't agree with, I have a lot of things to say about artistic intention, and I disagree with that on a lot of levels. Of course, once it's out, it's free, whoever can interpret it. And of course, you don't know how people are going to interpret it, right? And that's a whole other ballgame question of how can you, when you're criticized, how do you respond to that? And that's really important, and I obviously, we need to be careful about privileging discourses over witch hunts. It's much more important to evoke discourse and have that conversation. But at the same time, it's crucial that we, in terms of intention, when we're creating work, we think about what can I do in terms of curbing this to make it so that it could never be used, it could not be interpreted to justify racism and genocide and stuff.
If bringing it up to the table, you don't justify.
From an academic point of view, even in literature, books that we read, 100 years ago are interpreted in different ways than they were then and they are now. Just because differences in cultural values, differences in political values. If you read a book about, I'm majored in British literature, and if you read a book about imperialism in the 1800s in Britain, it was considered a good thing. It was cultural pride, but now it's considered, of course, bad. So, in terms of how work is interpreted, you can just look at Huckleberry Finn. Is it racist or is it not? Is it condemning racism? And so there's still attacks against Huckleberry Finn today. So, how does somebody control that when even 10 years later somebody may look back on it and say, from a different cultural standpoint, and say, "Hey, I don't agree with this." Or
I think one thing that you do is you say are you presenting something that's a charged thing as a neutral, or are you presenting something that's a charged thing and saying something about it, right? And so there's ways you can probe that. There's ways you can go there, right? And maybe you're presenting something that's. I do think we should talk about the specifics. I think it would be wrong not to talk about the specifics of the situation.
Sure, just not solely.
Yeah.
No, of course. But I think that it's crucial to also analyze how you deal with feedback, right? And but fundamentally, you present something as neutral, and it's okay, so why did you do that? Why did you present? Are you? Oh, that's racy, and then.
But nothing we do as performance artists is neutral, right?
Is it?
I don't think it should be.
I'm not interested in making neutral work.
So,
like, I don't want to make
an issue.
work,
An issue for me that I see happening in like this so-called art world, or the peripheral art world, or whatever, is the issue of appropriation of radical aesthetics. Right. So a lot of people who are making work nowadays appropriate radical political aesthetics or radical philosophical aesthetics or whatever without actually reading, without actually like delving into what those aesthetics represent. And it does come down to saying that, you know, aesthetic language is a real language, right? And so I think that's an important thing to grapple with also, is like there are lots of people who do that in lots of different ways.
I think related to that, and also related to the point that we were introduced a couple minutes ago, and that, like, how do you anticipate how people are going to respond to your work? The imagery you choose to use, whether how you're dressing yourself or what you include, and like the actions that you include. Basically, I think if you are making work that has a strong point, whether it's political or social or whatever. But if you have a point that you want people to get from it, whether it's outrage or solidarity or down the line, you have to be familiar with the language you're using, the visual aesthetic language you're using. And we're not trying to control how people respond, because people are going to respond differently whether they agree with you or not. But we can anticipate, we're making the distinction again, with whether people are going to get what you're doing with the imagery that you're using.
And this comes back to audience, right? Okay.
But you're also saying, like, people isn't like all people get the same. Like, some people get one thing. No,
it's so cultural, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's so cultural.
And it like completely varies, on the location, on
educational, educational background is a
social,
huge
cultural. So you can do like one performance, one place, and people are going to get something completely different than other people, other places. And, it has to be like somewhat open-ended. You can't just say, okay, well, I think like best art is that's like doesn't function on just like one level or has like one meaning. You're just saying one thing, it has like a lot of different levels of what you're saying, something on the surface, something, beyond that. A lot of people kind of get, their initial reading, that's the surface reading. Then it takes like another step to kind of get like the deeper meaning behind that, to engage with that, and for exactly different place, different people are gonna interpret differently.
One thing that I think Al Podrak of one of the things he usually says is that he hates performing in New York because people in New York are just so jaded in terms of like seeing weird things that it doesn't get the effect of what non grata tries to get across. Let's say when they perform in like Oklahoma or a small town in Europe, where that jaded view of performance or weirdness or
like you've seen everything.
Yeah, you've seen everything. It doesn't happen in New York specifically. I can't speak of like Boston or Philly or other major cities, but
it's also definitely true that a diversity exists. A diversity of interpretation exists within any one audience population, also, right? So like we're all white people here, basically, or passing white people, and like my experience of that night as the like annoying social justice person, social justice warrior.
Latino people here.
Sure. White or white passing people.
That's fine.
I know
I'll take that.
people here. Yeah.
And my experience as the annoying social justice warrior person, the night that sort of spurred all this stuff, was like, I was like, wow, what is this? Huh? And I kind of looked around and like, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but like I like looked around this room of mostly white people and like what's like checked in with my like few like people of color, black friends there, and was like, so how was this for you? Is this like? And they were like, yeah, this sucks. Like, this is like, it's great to remember lynching. Like, that's cool. Like, that's fun. And I was like, yeah, I think, all right, I'm going to go with my, and go hard into the annoying social justice warrior person.
Can you actually talk a little bit more about that, Kalan? Because I was going to ask, as a follow-up to, like, thinking about an artist's responsibility, like an audience's responsibility, too.
Yeah.
Somebody who's feeling a certain way in an audience, like, what do we feel like their thought process should be in terms of, like, immediately responding to a work? Like, and also considering their reaction and its possible effects on the rest of the audience. So like the possibility that a audience reaction is just as likely to be triggering to an audience as the performed action.
That's a good question.
So like what was that thought process for you? Like, I feel this way, what's next? What should I do?
I could talk about this a lot, and obviously the gross analog is like, you talk to like rape survivors and you're like, if only you can just try to not think of it as rape. Can you just try to not think of it as rape, and then it'll be okay, right? Like, if you just see it another way, like, maybe it'll be okay.
Does anybody say that?
I'm just saying that's like the extreme analogy of that perspective, right? But which is but yeah, of course. I mean, of course, this sounds. I mean, maybe I should describe the situation. Maybe if you want, I can describe like my experience
just
of that
in
night.
general, like what should be kind of like ideal ways for an audience to respond in the immediacy of the moment when they feel a certain way about it. Like, should the natural thing be to just you as that person go forward, or do you check in for like you already said this?
So there's a couple things. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, this is something that went through my head a lot, right? And I was like, I should check in with some people, make sure this is a thought for me. And I was like, I talked to a fucking ton of people. I talked to a lot of people, and afterwards, at one point, this white punk ran up and was like, What are you saying? What do you mean? Like, are you afraid? Are you? And grabbed the nearest black person and was like, what do you think? Is this upsetting to you? And like, homeboy was like, yeah, like, this is really upsetting to me, right? But
yeah, but I also asked some other black person, and he was like, no.
Yeah, we've had black
people. Like there's two versions
Ming's
to that.
roommate
just to make a point
was there.
Whole,
So
there's like different views, right? In the same performance, the audience can have like equal opposite views, right? Where like one person will see subject matter in one way and another person, unless it's like, for instance, that photo, which is like that Ian passed around, which we'll put as a part of this podcast, which is very, very blatant, right?
But I can actually say something where like, I would not be okay with it, because I'm against the KKK, but I'm against hanging people, regardless of who they are. You know,
which is why the photo was not unmet with controversy.
Right.
Yeah. So if I saw,
just showed you all the
but like if I saw that in the public, I'd be like, hanging people.
Also, like, let's not hang anybody.
Yeah, let's not hang anybody.
But it is a powerful image that does not mean let's hang people, right?
Yeah.
It means let's like question and like reverse historical norms, and like let's think about things in a different way, right?
Well, and
it's not telling people to lynch people. It's saying like, let's think about things in an opposite way, and like, what would that mean?
Also, with like a performance, it's usually like a sequence, so it goes from one point to another.
Yeah.
So like, and usually like when our performance is like a progression, so as opposed to like one thing that's just is there, it sort of like goes from one. It's like more narrative, I guess, in that way. So, you know, it's really impossible to like get the full levels of meaning until like the sort of whole thing plays out. You know, and
so
throughout the thing, you know, there's like things that happen. So, you know, it goes from like one and then to another and to another, and you know, ideally there's like a sequence of emotions. So when you are engaged with the whole thing, then it like goes from one thing to another, which is also kind of like becomes impossible when people sort of kind of just engage with the one part. And
well, that's what I was interested in hearing too from the people who were dissatisfied with the performance, right? Like, was there that thought like, I wonder if this is going to go somewhere that I'm going to be okay with? Or was, like, what was the juncture, and if you could talk about that point where you were just like, this is not going to go somewhere, and I'm not okay with where it's been, and it needs to stop right now?
Well, for me, there's two weird things, right? On the one hand, it's like, I mean, I've seen Wild Torus a lot, right? And I don't know if I should name names, but several people they were like, oh, let's shut it down. And I was kind of like, like, I don't know if I want to, because that's going to be read as participating in the performance, actually, which was an interesting sort of, like, I was like, no, I don't want to participate. I just want to punctuate it with like, and like when it's over, sort of run analysis.
Kind of like
whatever.
yelling out, so everyone can hear it is sort of participating.
Sure, that's like, what I'm saying. That changes the performance, like fundamentally for everyone around. Right?
When you get attention to yourself, you're participating.
You are now part of the performance.
Inevitably,
right?
It's part of the
That's the question.
historical telling.
Are
you part of it? Are you criticism?
I thought you were at the beginning part of the performance.
Right.
And you were part of the performance.
Yeah, I thought
like the
and a lot of
that you
people
two were
here
part
were
of it.
part of the performance. And my reaction, I mean, I don't even know where it was going because I'm taking photos, and I was like, oh, I hate these freaking cones because they remind me of Spain and the freaking Inquisition.
I know, right?
And I've lived there too. I've lived there too, and it's totally different. It's a different semiotic.
But I didn't even think about it because actually, I when I'm doing photos, I'm not really kind of observing.
But in the States, it's a really different semiotic.
But
In the
that
States,
was
it's something totally different.
My reaction was like yours, but just in a Spanish way.
That's
Like,
interesting.
I just hate these cones.
Because it's interesting, because I lived in Zaragoza for
like
6 months, and I love the Spanish ones. I actually
hate
love
them.
them.
No, it's
But I hate the
creepy as
KKK
hell.
one,
It's
right?
creepy.
Semana Santa, I can't stand that whole freaking religious.
It was a fundamentalist like push, Inquisition style.
Yeah.
Like
but I saw
they went out.
even connected to
KKK.
I mean, that was
in my view,
and that was my reading as well as yours. But that's just because I'm like,
And then
that's just because
probably
I'm
the
weird
way
and
I
I'm
took photos maybe was more showing that part. Maybe I'll actually show you guys because it was more like that kind of rejection. I don't know what I was.
the reading to me was so clear as like being a part of European, European aesthetics of like Inquisition and medieval monks and this like horrific like church uprising of fundamentalists who went against everybody who did not agree with them, whether it be scientists or like other religious figures or people outside of society or anybody who is not like anybody who did not fit in some way. And so that was so clear to me.
Yeah.
But I also understand that people read something else on top of that in our culture. And I only read, my initial reading was exactly like, for instance, Nugent Smith did a series with very similar costumes, and he referenced the exact same medieval literature and Inquisition literature, as well as like African costume, religious costumes that kind of were spread around Europe throughout that entire period. So like that was my initial reading, but I can see how people would get another reading from it.
And I don't think it's unfair to ask for an artist showing work in the U.S. to consider that it's going to be read in this and this way. Like in the world we live in, a pointy hat is going to take you to a couple of places, but inevitably on that list,
Guantanamo.
Inevitably on that list, you're going to go to KKK and Goya and maybe even like Maoist era China with struggle sessions. So there's a lot of things, but
Abu
maybe
Ghraib.
Exactly.
Guantanamo.
Photos from Abu Ghraib with the black.
Which a lot of artists have dealt with that subject matter with material.
So I'm thinking now of the Bedford and Bowery article that came out, and just requoting the headline, like, did the piece go too far, or was it far enough? Was it too real, or did it not go? Like you said, Mike, later. Did it not go far enough? Like,
well, it was real. So.
Well, that was also my anxiety in terms of, like you were saying earlier, in terms of intervening and in terms of like participating or whatever. And it's like, oh, is it art or life? And a part of it was going through my head, and other people's heads at the time was like, okay, what do you do when you see a Klan rally in the street outside your house? Like, you shut it down. That's what you do. You shut it down. And it's like that's, and it's also saying like aesthetic language is a real language, and if there are people in this rapidly gentrifying black neighborhood that this like white bar is in. Right, like what do you do? Like, and the black people from the neighborhood are in that bar are like experiencing it in this way. Like, what do you do?
So you read it as a literal
Klan rally,
literal rally.
It was the same. There's an equivalent of a Klan rally in the street and the performance.
To them, it was. I spoke to many people who were there.
Some people stormed out. Yeah,
we heard them like directly speak on this, and that their reaction to seeing this imagery is intimidation. It's not an image of solidarity. It's an image of intimidation, especially because they were being singled out to be told that this is not their country. And
no, I don't think anybody was singled.
So when I was there,
part of the
when I was there, yes, and I was trying to get
what I
a
found
copy
was
of
that
this.
there
So when I was
wasn't
there, I think about
you weren't like oppressing any group.
I don't think any
But it
group
might be
was
a
singled out.
many
No.
actions that I've
Literally
seen, many different performances I've seen, I think about intervening. And up until this night, I have done nothing. Many chances have like a past step, and part of it is because I don't like this right now, but what are they going to do next? Oh, it would be obnoxious and self-serving to step in. Oh no, I shouldn't do that because I don't know what their intention actually is or where they might go, or maybe I'm just restless and so I'm the only one who's bored and it would just be fucking rude and ridiculous to interrupt. But what I said before, what I love about performance is that it's so immediate and that the audience has such a huge impact that an intervention like that can completely change.
But what was different for you that night?
So this night, I realized, this is a time that I cannot just sit by and watch this continue. This is an evening where I feel the need to speak up because I felt like a lot of the people in the audience, often in performance, people are very passive, and this was not one that was especially engaging people, except for like the emotional reaction that was happening.
So how did you feel about the artists and the other performers' reaction to your reaction?
They said get over it.
Oh, the people who were performing, who I was intervening.
Yeah, what was that exchange like? What transpired?
I knew, and part of why I hadn't done this before is that it's going to piss people off. And I feel like art should be provocative, right? So there's going to be an angry reaction. And I figured...
So both sides are talking about art should be provocative.
I agree, and I add, at no point did I ever say or believe before that art should not be provocative. I just think you need to know what you're doing and the imagery you're using. So just one last thing to follow up with that. In a way, do you hold the artist in like a negative light for that provocation, or are you in a way just saying thank you for the provocation, here is the response, you should have anticipated this as well, and this kind of infinite cycle of provocation is the state that we should actually be in, where if the artist does something, audience is going to do something, and the artist should respond, and back and forth. I wouldn't say it exactly that way, but I think since Wild Torus is a troupe that prides themselves on creating chaos and putting people outside.
That's your opinion.
Putting people outside.
That's an opinion.
I've seen what y'all do.
Let her just finish.
No, I'm just saying.
Oftentimes, people in the audience don't know how to respond. They're either going to have a great time joining in, or they're just going to be like, "What the fuck?"
Well,
okay, it's Brooklyn. So, in this. So I figured, this is a time when they can take a little of their own medicine, and if I can completely disrupt this, which is difficult to do because there's so much noise and action going on, I was like, how the hell am I going to disrupt this without appearing that I am participating, So I figured this is the time to do it.
Did you feel like your reaction was somehow compromised by someone else's reaction?
No, I was glad to have other people speaking out. I didn't want to I didn't want to be the one girl trying to fuck up everything.
But did everyone have the same kind of response? Those who were responding, or were there, you think,
the
different levels of effective response to the performance?
The people who were on the floor, including Kalan, who's here, and Uniska, who's not, I was glad to have us all derailing it together because
I thought you were part of the performance.
That was the general impression. Actually, was like afterwards, people
were part of it.
People all thought people that were yelling were part of the performance.
I feel like just as a response,
you were part of it.
Yeah,
just as a response, the fact
opinion,
that to say that we pride ourselves in creating chaos or whatever, I think it's a sort of a misreading because. What we do, in my opinion, is represent chaos that exists, but it's not a point of pride to create chaos. It's, there's a chaotic element that's a response to, culture. That's what everything we do. And as fact is, yes, we are open to all interaction, and there's no way that you can actually disrupt because any reaction, we made a point of saying it's open to all participation, all audience.
Every reaction was very successful then.
Yeah, every reaction is participation. Some artists say, okay, this is me, this is performing, and it's very obvious where it's completely you interrupt somebody's performance, you're a complete asshole because that's a very specific, separate performance. Our performance is not like that, and we've had multiple, interactions where people try to like disrupt, destroy, extreme one way, extreme the other. Like people try to like, rape us. People try to like attack us. Many things, So we definitely don't ever shy away from that.
Last time we did the same performance because we did this performance. We started in Miami and we went to Louisiana, New Orleans, and in some other places. And in New Orleans, actually, everybody, which is like really hipster, and I don't know, they're also kind of rowdy Southerners, I guess. They started getting on the side of the hooded figures and basically beating.
So like the other aspect of the performance is a scapegoat, which I'm playing. So it's like the scapegoat represents like the people and being like the oppressed people. So then we're like, okay, here the audience, you can have these things. You can choose what to do. Like you're going to attack the scapegoat, or you're going to attack these other figures. So we give people like. Actually, we invite people to like join in, attack one side or the other. Sometimes, sometimes.
What happened after that?
So people beat the shit out of me. I was laying naked on the floor in this goat mask and crawling on the floor and screaming. People beating the shit out of me with like cardboard tubes and like these big like rubber things and just spray painting me. So it's like obviously it's like it's meant to kind of incite the crowd and then sort of like what side are you kind of joining? Are you gonna like scapegoat? I mean, it's very on the nose. It's very like direct, and obviously these figures are supposed to like represent all the bad shit, So, So
well, I think that point you make about representation is precisely the philosophical point that the whole discussion beggars and hinges on. Is about utopia and microcosms and basically like reproducing structures of oppression or reproducing structures of utopia, right? And so it's like, and I've criticized this in y'all's work before. It's like it seems like y'all like reproduce like heteronormalizing situations where like man is wearing clothes, woman is not wearing clothes, and I think it's not true anymore. But I think in the past, maybe it was more true.
Selective reading, but I think things you've done.
Well, sure, of course, but I also think that
we can all nitpick each other's
of course. But I think that the interesting philosophical question also becomes one of like of criticism post haste, right? Where like of course, like when you. And that's one way to delineate this stuff is like because of course like that changes and what we did was sort of like making it a critical field instead of a ambiguous field of representing evil or maybe this is just neutral versus after the fact you write something about it and you situate that and also even right then like afterwards a lot of people had discussions about it right afterwards and I think that's something that's actually I think that's something that's critically absent in most scenes and in the New York scene of course is a critical feedback like afterwards people actually talking about ideas that are represented in the
that's actually really exciting to me.
I think so too. And that's exactly why I didn't
like y'all's response. I don't know if anybody's read the
long article?
The long essay.
I haven't published that yet.
No, there is a long essay. It is like a 7-page essay that Wild Torus collectively came up with, and it addresses like a lot of issues from that night, as well as like embracing the audience participation in a way, and saying like that this is just a reading of the work, and you're not negating that reading, right? You're just saying like this is a reading of the work, and we make like explosive work, and certain people in certain places with certain cultural backgrounds will read it in certain ways, right?
I mean, like I was going to say, like when we making those, like it was obvious, like we knew that some people are going to read it as that, but like but for us, we're presenting this as like a figure of evil. So whatever evil that is like evil to you, you
well, so I guess that's the question, right? If you're making this performance and someone comes to you and they say, "Is it okay with you if you perform this performance and 5% of your audience experience extreme like flashbacks about lynchings, right? Is that okay with you to perform that, right? And that's a question. But the
Can
other,
I express a very unpopular opinion?
Well, I want to say there's one thing I want to say that's unpopular too, which is that this was something I want to make sure that we touch on.
No,
is that,
unpopular.
I know that's what I'm saying. Me too. Is that fucking PC culture got Donald Trump elected, and that's a huge thing. Yeah. And like I don't want to, and being a social justice warrior person has some strings attached.
I just want to make a note. Like these friends of mine that just performed in Spain, they did a performance. I mean, they're not performers; they're actually theater. They were in this little town. No, they were in Madrid, and they were going to do this performance. Well, this theater act. And then my friend and I invited one of my friends. I'm like, you have to go see these people because I saw them here. And it turns out the piece they did in Madrid was, it's very complicated, but somehow the Twin Towers come and the subject of Bin Laden and this and that and for instance, he was telling me how that piece they could not do it in the States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then and my friend, I mean, they did it now in Madrid and whatever. I don't know where else they've been showing it. But for instance, that's an imagery that each, coming out of the topic of, that we were talking, is like, is that in your sense okay? That people.
Well, you would be able to do that in the United States because here is encouraged to do whatever performance and have freedom of speech, and you can do that. I think in Europe too, only in places where.
But here, for instance, if you mention the Twin Towers, it's like a taboo. Nobody can do any art.
Well, not maybe
with mentioning the Twin Towers or showing the Twin Towers.
But there's also a lot of alternative opinions, just in film and the media. It's not just one channel saying, okay, obey completely. It's all these different things happening at the same time, and that's kind of how a performance is. It's a lot of different symbols, and I don't know exactly what's the correct thing, but I think that PC culture is maybe it's just being triggered, quote unquote, and having internet personas versus trolls on the internet versus in reality they could be completely normal person, so seemingly.
What was your unpopular opinion?
Is that I'm in complete First Amendment person.
Which one is that? Is that the good one?
That's freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, all that fun stuff.
Thank you.
I work professionally as a journalist, and I come up with issues of freedom of speech and press very often. I very much know my rights, and as much as we hate it, as much as we don't dislike it, I'm very much in favor of freedom of speech where both I can state my opinion from the left and, we hate it, but somebody who is part of the KKK has their right to freedom of speech. And that is a good thing, whether we dislike it or not.
It's a very principled view.
And, what I don't dislike about this PC culture, triggering, is that it's controlling speech. It's anti-freedom of speech. It wants to control your freedom of speech.
Well, something I've noticed recently is that there's no good way to talk about political correctness.
Literally, a performance I criticized last year. I said, I didn't like this performance. I didn't even name the performer or artist. I got called a white cis male. And
obviously you are.
And identifying as a transgender woman. And it's just, and this person was like, you don't have the right to talk about this, how dare you? And, it just, I have every right to talk about this, regardless of my gender or my sex or my race. And when you're saying you have to be a certain person to be able to express your opinions about something, that you are controlling speech. And I don't agree with that at all.
I'm interested in see if anybody on the table wants to bring up trigger culture in the context of live performance versus cinema, for example? Maybe Mitchell.
Yeah,
we talk about
like,
movies a lot. No, but because in film,
people see more violence every day on television.
There's a horror genre, for example, where inducing fear into the audience is the name of the game.
Did you hear about this Flying Lotus movie? Flying Lotus, the new movie. He made a movie, and like everyone's like walking out, like in Cannes Festival, like half the audience just walked out, like they couldn't stand it.
Yeah. Okay, then maybe take up this question that I'm posing.
And did you watch Human Centipede?
Yes. Okay, but wait, let's not get into this. No, because the question is, okay, in cinema, going into it, perhaps you have an idea. If you're going to a horror movie, most likely, if you're susceptible to triggers, you're going to get triggered by something. But should we approach this question in that kind of way as like a, kind of like a warning beforehand when it comes to performance? Or is performance itself going to adopt something like the horror genre where it should just be, who are we all here to agree on something like that? But just to say that, like,
be advised.
Anything could be triggering within this live moment.
Well, it's not the rating system.
I'm going to put this out there.
The rating system.
There
is no rating system for performance.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's the incredibly outmoded, arbitrary, outdated, very heteronormative cis view of this is the MPAA
film rating system.
Which there's like, this is something that performance you are seeing in live, film you are seeing something that has been distributed, that has gone through like a distribution process, that has been it's a collective of artistic minds compromising each other's vision and going through a distribution process and going through a studio, possibly a studio mandated editing process. Anyway, I'm rambling, but the MPAA rating system is like, it's something that I just can't even I don't even look at.
But without the rating, just talking about genre in general. When
it comes to triggers and when it comes to understanding what affects people, what there are. If you're watching something live, I would personally hold the crew, the cast, the audience accountable for providing within the program, within the nature of the performance as it is, to I don't know if I'm on.
Yes.
I kind of take a different view here. I'm very much about accountability and accommodating for the audience, the viewership, the culture that one might be presenting to. And I'm so sorry for just completely rambling here. With film, it's out there. And we're talking about. You want to talk about
quickly, I guess. Like in terms of performance art, evoking as one of the possible emotions from an audience, fear. Just general thoughts on that. Whether or not being an appropriate thing for performance artists to try to represent live.
Of course.
And so within the current social climate, how does one do that?
Yeah, I can
jump in.
I'm going to interject. You can. There are people who have who have a phobia against balloons, and you have balloons in your performance.
Right. Yeah. Mitchell never blown up a balloon before our performance.
Yeah, which I have.
Oh yeah, and that was a terrible performance because I was anticipating.
I know. People have literally freaked out and have told me I was so upset I had to leave the room because there's balloons in your
I freak out about glass and I freak about fire.
And so there's I understood. I understood making that work. I have everybody has kind of a balloon phobia. So, because it's explosive and crazy and weird, and it's everything about balloons are terrible.
There are some you can't anticipate, but there are some that are very.
I had made work with balloons, and I knew that. I knew that people. I also am latex allergic, so it's even worse.
Kalan,
you'd have to rub it on.
I want to make a big, kind of before the conversation goes forward. I want to make a big what do you call it? Linguistic distinction here. So there's stuff that upsets people, right?
Right.
Like evokes an emotional reaction.
Right.
That's good. That's what art should do. Big time. We all agree on that. Then, like, when you're talking about phobias, it's not like, oh, I hate that stuff. No, it's like a psychological condition that you can't just will yourself out of. Close your eyes and make it go away. It's debilitating. It stops you in your tracks. So, you know, it's not. Lots of people don't like spiders, but if you are arachnophobic, then you're not going to be able to be in the same room. You're not going to be able to concentrate on any other task. You're so this applies to when we're talking about trigger warnings. It's not just stuff that upsets you. It's not just stuff that you don't like. It's stuff that's gonna fucking ruin your day. You know, you have an eating disorder and you're having a bad body image day, and someone talks about, oh my god, I just lost 30 pounds. Like I've lost 30 pounds in the last 2 weeks. You guys should do what I do. That's gonna ruin your.
But how does
day.
this person supposed to know?
Okay. They should give a shit. They should care. You don't. There's stuff that you don't just blast out there. You need to be aware of your audience. So that doesn't mean that everything needs to come with a caption and a warning. But you need to just be considerate. This is not about freedom of speech and censorship. This is about giving a shit about the people who are your friends.
I basically agree. I think this is not an issue of policy, but it's an issue of like as a community, like we thought better of you. You know, and it's kind of like it's not like saying we need to make some rules that deal with this stuff, but it's saying like, you know, you really, how did this get through your filters? Like you ended up doing something. Hold on, you ended up doing something that like essentially targeted a certain demographic of your audience who was already targeted by all this shit and like made them feel some kind of way. You know, which is, and that's institutionalized racism. That's what institutionalized racism is. Inadvertently, I'm not calling it. I'm just saying, like, what this is right now is a moment of feedback. It's a moment of like, and the big question for me is like, okay, so like, if you guys are making a performance and someone says to you, hey, like, it's possible that when you do this, these people in your audience are going to respond in this way and remember lynchings, and everyone else is not, and everyone else is going to be fine, and like. The black people in your performance are going to be like, oh, damn, like, that really reminds me of lynchings. Like, that sucks. Like, great way to remember that. Like, I don't have to remember that all the time anyway. And it's like, are you still willing to do that? Is that a sacrifice you're still willing to make? And it's like, if you have that if you don't have that conversation, then it's like, okay, you should probably have the conversation. If you do have that conversation and you say yes, then it's like, that's interesting.
But, like, what you're saying is, like, you're actually singling out a certain demographic on your own. You're saying... this one particular demographic is going to feel this way.
You're assuming
even though you're actually yourself. Well, you're just saying
I'm
that.
Speculating
okay,
about
speculating. Yeah, even though yourself you're not actually part of that demographic that you are speaking for. Right?
Like this white.
No, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Yeah. So
let me interrupt here again. Sorry, let me interrupt here again just to reiterate something from the beginning. A question that I thought was key to this conversation and many others going forward. Are we interested here in growing together and learning from this experience, or have some of us given up on some others and it's just going to be a matter of who wants to say they have the moral high ground or not? And also the question of the efficacy of calling out someone as racist, sexist, xenophobic, what have you, versus getting down and having a real conversation about those things in good faith to move forward.
Well, the problem with this performance, the Wild Horse performance, was that people were calling it racist, but I know Mike and Amy, they're not racist, so I can't.
Everyone's racist.
Everyone is racist, but do we always purposefully make racist work? No, we don't.
No.
Sometimes we
No one is actually.
That's
no one is
even
racist.
That is arguable. We have racial prejudices.
We have racial prejudices.
Exactly.
All of us
We're all
do.
prejudiced.
It was an oversight. It was an oversight, right? I understand that.
I wouldn't say that's an oversight. I would just say, it's to certain people, it's meant to be a threatening thing, and
But to who, right? I mean,
it's meant to be threatening to everybody.
And that's the question.
That's the thing. It's meant to be threatening to everybody.
And that's the sort of operative moment of discourse. Is like if someone approaches you and is like, "Hey, this thing you're doing might really alienate black people." If someone says it to you, like, how do you respond to that, right? And it's like, and that's like a critical moment of feedback in the community.
But that wasn't the conversation.
That's the conversation we're having now.
Right. That's the conversation that should always happen. But sometimes the conversation gets out of hand.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to put this out there. like talking about things online. I know all of us have done it at certain points. I'm blaming myself as well.
I don't engage in it.
You're like, you definitely have. And so have I.
That's the difficult thing. And
this is, like, that is not beneficial to us as a community, right?
Well,
to Kalan's credit, you had a very tempered response.
I beg to differ in a certain way, which is just to say that I think that if you are going to talk about something online, it's really wonderful to prioritize discourse and ideas and dissociate it from names.
I like the way you talked about it online.
Thanks.
But it opened up the door for other commenters to act a certain way.
People,
sure.
Like being specific and calling people out.
And I think that can be one way to deal with that is to try really hard to like people like, oh, who was it? What was the venue so we can boycott it? Like, fuck that.
Yeah.
That's so much bullshit.
Right,
like,
because first of all,
they make some good work,
the venues don't know what's going to happen beforehand.
Yeah.
All of us as performers know that. The curators, who they were half of, don't know what's going to happen. The artists sometimes don't know what's going to happen.
I mean, plenty of people don't like our performance, don't come to our performance. They boycott us, whatever. You know, it's like, that's fine. You could boycott us, you know, it's like, you can do whatever, you know, I think is also like, you know, I'm just going to say that, like, yeah, I mean, I perfectly like knowing like what illusions people can make. I never would thought that like this performance alienate black people as a group. We've had like mixed race people part of the performance. We had like black people part of the performance. You know, like it may alienate some black people. It may alienate some white people. At no point do I actually think that like it makes any distinctions by these like specific sort of, you know, racial lines.
What would be a productive way to critique performances? Because, like,
critique
honestly, I think like in person or like person to person, I think is like very effective. Because like, I've like actually reached out about pieces I've made about race in the past.
Because the problem with this,
like to my friends who are black and performance artists and everything, and I was just like, tell me your thoughts. Like, should I do this piece or not?
Just like in
you're an art writer.
Yeah, well, because first off, you had to...
And performance artists.
Well, because first off, you have to actually see the work. And the problem is, people are commenting on just a picture. They don't even know what the context of what they're seeing.
To them, it's unimportant.
Yeah.
They just see one image
so
and that's all that.
It's just the symptom of this PC culture where I just need to see the picture, and I'm just going to yell about it. Make a judgment about it.
This
and
is like clickbait stuff.
Yeah, it's clickbait stuff. It's not even understanding what you're even seeing.
In this topic, would it be different, like in their performance, if before we would have be given a sheet of paper where they explain what they were going to do?
I think it would be totally different.
Yeah, but
and we were also we started talking about this with we mentioned like trigger warning and how can we possibly combine this with performance. Some stuff. I love art that doesn't need an artist statement to come across, but for something like this, I think it could have been hugely beneficial. That's a great point, Mara. I didn't even think about like how that could have changed. That could have changed the course of this evening. Like if we had gotten a sheet that was like, you know, this is a narrative piece. We're gonna start with upsetting imagery. We're gonna start with upsetting imagery, and then y'all are gonna see where it goes. And any and all participation is welcome. Then that would have totally changed. I wouldn't have felt the need to disrupt it because I would have known what the point was.
Well, and I think
so you need a piece of paper that tells you to watch to the end.
No, not at all. The truth is, there's lots of ways to do that, and the onus is on you.
An extra point about how this could incorporate triggers for stuff that is obviously upsetting, like, you know, vomit, blood,
I just want to...
self-harm.
I mean, honestly, you should go to performance art
Excuse me,
events.
I'm still talking. So, a sheet like that, even like a brochure that's handed out at the door, you know, it doesn't have to say who's going to do it or when and where. Like, hey, something on the bill tonight includes... like actual vomiting, you know.
Yeah, we called the tour.
I would love that.
We had a name for the tour. It was Subliminal Access Pipeline,
Yeah.
and the fact was that this performance was about oil, and it was about evil forces, and it was about Christmas, you know, the time of year. It was all about like the context, like all of our performances. So to say like, oh, there was no information and we have nothing to like base this off of is like kind of not reading ahead of time on what's happening.
Who do you think read that? Who showed up?
It was literally in all of the promo.
Yeah,
Like people, I know people don't read the promo,
Yeah, they
right? No, they don't.
Well, people aren't going to read a letter that's on the wall either.
But I'm sorry, we're DIY, and like we're DIY and we're performance, and we don't always print everything.
Well, I also want to say, like, I've been in performances where we cut ourselves, and it was really offensive for some people, and we went to great lengths to make trigger warnings before, and it absolutely did not work. Like, people were absolutely still super upset and offended. But I think that's what I'm saying, is that there's tons of ways to do that, and the onus is on us, on you, as a culture worker, as a producer of work, to do that in a creative way. And that was, for me, that was one of the most upsetting moments, was like when I was saying, I think this is racist, I think you guys should stop doing this, and y'all's response was, get over it, right? That contextualized it in a very precise way. That was
what
like,
do you expect within the performance? Like,
do you think they would have said that to a black guy that was saying that?
I don't know.
No, they would not.
Because all the black people left.
All the black people?
All the black people that I talked to who were like pissed off were like, I'm fucking leaving.
I talked to some black people after the performance, so
it doesn't really matter who was black and white.
I don't think that was the point.
I didn't actually like.
Sure, no, totally.
We're like, do like partially black people count? I mean, come on.
I mean, the point is, like, if I actually think you're going into their performances, I think you guys should move on into the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Decide how you present or not present.
Well, it's just like,
well, and that's what I've learned from this experience, is basically the soundbite. Like, the onus
is Jody black.
Yeah, well,
it's like.
All right, we're being filmed.
One person
like
at a
one
time,
person at a
so
time.
we can.
Well, the soundbite that I've learned from this whole thing is that the onus is on us as producers of cultural work to curb the intentionality of our work in such a way that it cannot be read in certain ways, right? And so that's something that we need to do. Is
or
like,
if it is read in certain ways, it's because you want it to be read.
Sure. Well, or it's like, I mean, you make a piece and you think, like, how can I make sure this piece is not interpreted?
Well, you go through all the pains you take to make sure nobody reads it in a certain way, and then you do it, and then like one person shows up and they read it in that one way. And then they like make it very obvious, and they sort of like entice other people and to read it in their own way, creating a counteractive performance. I'm just saying, it's like one person can take, umbrage to what's happening and can actually like bring everybody else to their side without those other people having those thoughts until somebody else says it to them, right? So what you're doing is, so as an artist, you're like, okay, I do try to predict every interpretation that I can, and then until then you don't, and then like somebody,
I think
one
like
person,
the artist can play the boogeyman.
Majority.
The artist can take these symbols. That's why I feel always, as an artist, I'm not thinking about like, oh, what is, what's the best piece I can do that will be the most popular, or that will be the most beautiful, or like I don't actually think about art that way. I think about it more like what's gonna start a discussion, what's going to actually maybe it's bad, but I don't think we kind of have like in New York City it's so easy to just like offend people that I don't know. We hadn't had any other issues besides in New York City with this performance.
Just speaking about how varied a performance can have a different interpretation. Me and your performance at Locks October, when you were putting makeup on me, I'm putting clothes on me, and we're putting makeup on each other and dressing and undressing in women's clothing. To most women I talked to, it was more empowering. It was more positive. For men, most of the responses for men was like, "Oh, this is submission," or they're seeing femininity as weakness. And even though I see femininity as my femininity as strength and confidence.
No, should that be like some sort of trigger warning?
But I can't.
It plays against the power matrix.
But no, like I can't control how people are going to interpret this performance.
Yeah, and we are performance artists, and we make dangerous fucking work, right?
Yeah.
Not me.
you and I can talk about this separately later.
Well, Olivia, you said you'd want to do a performance in Virginia where you wanted to burn the Confederate flag.
I did that.
Now, is that a trigger warning to like
for people who
are you going to tell that to like people that like I'm going to burn a symbol of hate and maybe triggering to you?
But in a Southern culture, that's very distracting.
Someone actually, before I could burn it, a person who was walking over the bridge took it and threw it in the water before I could. So yeah, it pissed people off.
Yeah.
But they were destroying it already for you, or they were like on your side.
Exactly, and they were mad. They were mad. But then I was like, "Ha! Look what you did! You just threw it."
If you're gonna do a public performance, say burn a Confederate flag in a southern state, is it your responsibility to go out and say to the public first, "I'm gonna do something that's gonna like
offend you
and trigger you," because even though you're completely,
Great question, and I think the distinction here is that the people who I wanted to piss off with that piece, I think you would want to piss them off too. Like basically white supremacists who see this narrow view of history.
No, we actually want to piss everyone off equally.
Okay, great. But this last piece that we have been discussing with the black KKK robes, your intention there.
Also, we should probably not. Sorry to interrupt you, but let's not label them as the KKK robes because
they weren't. KKK.
We've established
because they aren't.
Well, they are what they are. They're black.
They reminisce.
With the
your intentions there were to comment on how fucked up things are in the United States.
No, not just the United States. Don't be like something.
So your intentions there were to express solidarity to people who are suffering and who feel like they are working in an oppressed, fucked up system.
Well, but not through those figures.
And I'm not sure that was successful because of the discussion that we're having now.
Well, because nobody actually saw the end of the performance, so,
Olivia.
Hey, you guys said you finished completely.
What was...
Well, it did for that time because everyone jumped in, so it was
using the Confederate
over.
flag on my body or you using it in a performance? If somebody saw, the first... few moments of that, would they think it was pro or con? Right?
What are we talking about, yours or mine?
Both of ours, right?
Well,
so both of us have worked with the Confederate flag in different ways, right?
Before I burned it, I dragged it on the ground behind me. So.
Still, just you and the thing, right? As a cultural symbol. Mm-hmm. Could somebody read that and have intervened early into both of our performances in a manner that was kind of aggressive. Oh, you're aggressive or why are you white and dealing with a symbol and trying to address race with your work? And anybody could have, right? Mm-hmm. So, not that I'm saying that people shouldn't do that, but when as performance artists, when we make work, right, we open ourselves up to audience to address what we are talking about. Whether it be more general or if they feel it's specific, they address it specifically. Your work, it was general, but they address it specifically.
But also to have your work interrupted is quite a thing that I could also, as devil's advocate, just try to imagine. And that's something that it's obvious to me that the reaction from the artist was not going to be positive or rational.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I could also see the side of the audience and something maybe being
you sort of get
overlooked.
You don't need to do anything else already. The audience took over. So it's no matter what you do, no, seriously, after that point, no matter what you do is really not important because once it's taken on, it's fine. It took on its own thing. But as an artist, you sort of, fuck it, you just let it happen because there's no taking it back. Now it's
no, it's everybody's piece.
Yeah. Any artwork, once it gets taken over by whatever, a technical difficulty or an audience or whatever, you're not going to bring it back to your original point. You're just going to work it out to what it works out, and that's fine. That's what it is,
Which is why this should be about healing, because what is it about our community right now that has given us so much bad faith to react that way immediately to a piece and take it at face value?
I want to reiterate that I think it's not about policy. It's about I identify as an anarchist because anarchism is a profound interest in community. That's what anarchism is, and it's and we don't have policies. We take things
as they come in the particular context in which they arise, and this is a particular context in which this thing has arisen. And for several members of our community, for many members of our community, this was an upsetting thing, right? And we were like, okay, like let's look at why this particular thing was upsetting and talk about the minutiae and particularity of why this particular thing was upsetting and deal with that. And it becomes about filters. It becomes about like, okay, so this thing might upset certain people, and we talked to them, and some of them were really upset by that, right? And that's what it's about, right? It's just.
But what about on the practical level as well? Let's say we're gearing up for a massive street war, and
we are.
You keep alienating allies because of momentary disagreements.
Well, I think
that's also not.
I think what I'm saying,
viable.
Right, and I think what I'm saying is that like, I mean, you look at. I do think the discourse of trigger warnings is like pretty useless and pretty like and like not. I don't know, right? I mean, it's like, I have been dealing with that for a long time. Like, what do you warn everyone when you're going to be naked? Warn everyone when you're going to, like, come on. Like, I mean, at a certain point, like, you need to go outside your house and deal with it. And Zizek says some interesting things, for all his annoying as Zizek is, about trigger warnings. There's a world
you can't control.
Yeah, well, and it's like we need to form thick skin.
Exposure is a strong thing, and it's, in a way, it's inoculation, so exposure to certain things that, it is a form of therapy, in a way.
But we need to form thick skins about certain things so that we can fucking deal, right? And we need to be able to deal in the world.
I just feel like I'm part of a different generation where it's just...
Which generation?
What's
the generation?
I'm 28,
what's your generation called?
I guess
we're the same age.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What generation?
We only have 6 years separating.
But it's
I'm the same age too.
It's a complete different education in terms of there was no such thing as trigger warnings. There was no such thing as...
But actually,
Yeah.
there were. We were talking about the MPAA system.
Babe, I'm older than you, and they were.
Which is greatly flawed, and, like, honestly, reinforces a lot of bad shit, like Mitchell said.
There actually are trigger warnings on TV.
Yes, there's trigger warnings for broadcasting programs.
Yeah.
The first place I came across trigger warnings
was
like before I went on Tumblr or
Epilepsy, for instance, right? Epilepsy.
They are, like, on TV, it shows that say NC.
Reddit.
One person at a time.
How are we even defining trigger warnings?
That's what we're talking about.
So, but what I'm taking a broader view of it is that a heads up warning for, hey, this post,
then the police would come and lynch you.
It's not that extreme. This post, this link, this image contains an image of someone dying. Mutilation, like gore. I saw this on like Reddit, which people love to see as this bastion of like men's rights and and misogyny and stuff. I saw those on Reddit before I saw those on Tumblr, and even there, like people have a consideration for, hey, we know that people don't want to see an image of somebody dying. They don't want to see a mutilation or gore or like something that's not safe for work.
Well, then don't click on the link that says beheading.
Exactly. That's why you have a tag to let people know. Okay, I don't want to see that.
I feel like our audiences are like pretty narrow already, especially here. So like mostly people that come to the show are like kind of know what to expect, and maybe it's going to be maybe more upsetting than they expect or something else, but. In certain situations, it is appropriate when it's like completely cold introduction to an artist or a performance, and maybe you're somewhere where.
Oh yeah, and then we were.
But like.
Oh, finish.
No, I just feel like for the most part though, like when we do shows here, people that come to Wild Torus performances, they know it's not going to be just like. Kind of just like it's going to be maybe intense in one way or another.
We went to.
I mean, I've seen performances that I've loathed.
Yeah. We went to.
But would you rather unsee them? Would you rather unsee them?
I mean, I wasn't.
It's just like everything you hate and everything you love.
You can say of many performances that you've seen.
But I guess I just control I know how to react. I know how to control my behavior. I don't.
Right, but we also can't expect everyone to.
I think in New York it was opposite what happened in Houston too. Because
in Houston we had Donald Trump people
we had this guy protesting how naked and weird we were. They were like, "Get out of here!"
Yeah.
Alt-right power and like really. I don't know if they were joking, but it sounded.
No, this guy was like full on. I'm like, here, dude, just like you have the mic, you want to talk about Trump, and he's like, oh no.
But like But like it's okay.
He was like,
it's okay to like post photos of like Donald Trump effigies burning, but like something that may be other triggering is not okay. It's just you're having double standards about a lot of things of what you're considering okay and what is going to be not okay.
Here's I think I don't want to talk about trigger warnings because I think that's not where I take this conversation. Yeah. I actually think, honestly, for me, it's about agility in discourse, right? And it's about like honestly, what I'm saying is like I thought you guys made some bad art, and I think you're better than that. I think you can do better work, and I think you can be more clever.
That's a personal opinion, yeah.
But I'm justifying it in certain ways, and I'm saying here's why I think this was not an effective piece, and why I think it was. And here's how I think you can be more clever and more, evocative of some discourse.
We're here at the table having a discussion.
I feel like that's our piece that we've done that's elicited the most discussion. So I don't know if that makes it bad or good. I don't know.
Sure, exactly. But what I'm saying is that I think you guys can be more clever than you were. I'm saying I think you guys can be more agile and more clever, and I expect that of you as members of my community. And I want to be a member. I want to be a member of a community.
And Mike and Amy, as the artists, do you have something similar to say to like the audience response? Like, did you expect something a little more?
I feel like we expect our audience, especially that knows us, has been to our performances before, to like, if you're going to participate, at least like try to engage on the level of the piece, what it's saying. If you're interested in it, if you're not interested in it, then by all means, like, don't join or don't come.
But you can leave.
Exactly. And
think people like sling these words really easily. Racist, sexist, fascist. And I've done it too to people, and it's like
I don't, and I want to say that I want to say that I was careful with how I.
You just said it's racist, like really loud.
Well, but I'm saying I wrote about this thing.
No, but before you wrote anything, you kind of got everyone riled up. No, that's what happens. One person in the audience can get the whole audience like. Sure. It's the power of populism and demagoguery. It's like fucking getting one person to get like everyone behind you. It doesn't matter what you're saying. You're just saying it loudly, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's racist." Oh my god, I don't want to be, racist. I'm gonna better like fucking, so I'm saying. It's like
you both wrote post-performance texts, and in both,
which you
were both a lot more articulate and more compassionate. Yeah. Which I think is the broader thing here is to talk about how we discuss these things on the internet and how we do or not have a certain like compassion for each other as a community, broadly speaking, performance art, if we want to even do that.
Facebook is like the asshole of like people.
Totally.
I think now you also feel like now you're saying kind of backtracking like, oh, you could be more clever, you could be, like that's a lot different than saying you're fucking racist.
But let's not think of it as backtracking. Maybe we're making progress. Maybe this is progress.
Go forward.
I'm just saying it's a little different.
Mikey, let's go forward.
Yeah, we're going forward, not back.
Yeah, it's fine. No, honestly, I don't care. My personal feelings are, I'm not even like talking about that, so I don't really care. I'm just talking about like, what happens in a certain situation. And we all like have to be aware of what our actions, lead to. So both of us should think about that, I guess.
So what I'm saying is,
as a community, like, I'm sorry, I consider ourselves a community.
I think
that is to me, that's what the most important thing to me about making performance work or engaging with y'all in any way, friendship, lovers, otherwise. I'm looking around everybody.
Who have you had sex with?
That kind of stuff,
Yeah,
that's
so
kind of derailing.
like I am very close to a lot of people in this room, and I care about what y'all make. And I care about what I make. And if I make something that kind of sucks in some way, I'd love to be called out on it. Not on Facebook, like in person. I would love somebody to like say to me personally,
like that
or send me a personal message that says like what you did was triggering, offensive, blah blah, whatever. I would want to talk about it. I would want to like go further.
So fast. It's so contemporary.
I would want feedback. I would want critical feedback.
The problem with this critical, go ahead.
That's just my point. It's like you can't say like one is better than the other, but. Yeah, there are a lot of trolls on the internet, but there are a lot of people who act fake on the internet, but then in real life they're awful. So, like, I can't...
Yeah, there's people who say things on the internet, they will not say it to me in my face.
Oh, that's like literally everything.
Well, that's another thing. People should feel like but people don't.
Otherwise, I would like fight people a lot more in real life.
But
if they said the same things to me online, that
what
they said
really,
in life.
we touched on something back, especially with like Twitter and like Facebook, is that people just see an image or something and they just immediately assume what it's all about. Or
it's decontextualized.
Yeah, it's decontextualized, and you don't understand what is actually happening. It's just people reacting against. Oh, it's like herd mentality. People. I should react this way because, I believe in X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
That's what I also really dislike as somebody who is, like, LGBT, is that, like, people who are non-LGBT, like, assuming my outrage about what I should be offended about.
Yeah.
And it's like, there are things that, I'm not going to, I listen to Eminem. He says fag. I don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't...
Did you see the fucking North Korean movie? The fucking, like... Oh my
No,
God.
no.
What's it called? What's the shit
The
called?
Interview?
The Interview, God.
But like, you're assuming my
Just the first
outrage and what, like, I should be
first time.
offended
I
by.
also like The Interview.
Just the first 5.
I'm not some,
love
like,
it.
delicate creature that needs to be protected. I am fully in control of myself. And so...
I put a lot more trust in people, like, that you can make work that is intense and that they can disseminate it in a way like how they can, right? I put as much faith in the audience as I put in myself. And sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. Like, I look to the audience and I think, like, these people are, like, smarter, if not as smart, if not smarter than me.
I think that's important.
So, like, I'm not saying, like, I need to dumb it down or make it really simple and easy for people.
I think...
Like, I can present something complex.
That people can, get more than just the surface reading,
and they can get something
like,
that I didn't even intend, which is, like, fucking
and
magical.
understand more than what you were just saying, like, on the surface immediately.
And I think we've all been there in our careers, our performance careers, where we did a performance and we're like, fuck, I just did that.
I did something really dumb. I hope nobody hates me now. Like maybe I talked about things that I shouldn't have talked about, like, even visually.
I'm gonna have a drink or 5.
Yeah.
But, even, like, actually those times is, like, where you actually learn the most. Is, like, when you, like, push things and you kind of, like, are like, oh, fuck, like, maybe I shouldn't have done that or I shouldn't have done it. But you actually, like... In essence, you don't actually feel like you shouldn't have done that because you feel like you actually have grown from that and you discovered something. And,
I think that's a good way to look at it.
You know, so...
And I always hope, like my biggest thing as a performance artist is that, like, audience does not get back to me, like, verbally in any kind of way, right?
Yeah.
Often.
So, like, I've gotten, like, mad heckling and catcalls during different performances, and they've always been by men, and fuck them. But I would have loved, like, a more specific, like, interaction where I would be like, why did you feel like you needed to scream during my performance or catcall me during my performance? Like, I would like to have that conversation. And so it's super awesome to have that conversation after the fact of, like, people being upset by something, no matter why. And, like, how can we talk about this?
And I think there's a couple of things, and I agree with what you said earlier about, talking to people in person. In this particular situation, I tried to talk to one person, and they screamed at me. But the next day y'all were in Cuba. And I wanted to talk to you guys, but also I was also
they were like in Cuba that night.
Yeah. But I also want to say that one of the things I wrote was because I felt like I'd learned something, and it wasn't about demonizing anybody or calling anybody out or making it was like I was like, okay, I think I've learned something about the way to deal with intention and fucking addressing discourse and issues in work. But what I would like to see come out of this is actually having more critical feedback in our performance community, and having more and also people, like, thinking about, like, what gets through their filters and how things might affect people, and, like, thinking about maybe if I put an American flag here or something, like, or did this thing, maybe it would preclude it reading in this certain way or whatever, right? Or and think about intention, thinking about how intention works, and thinking about
thinking about whether people want to how we deal with reproducing structures of oppression and how we deal with reproducing micro-utopic structures or whatever. But,
I think it's a really good place to end it on.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Who that is, ho? That girl is a tomboy. That girl is a tomboy. That girl is a tomboy. Who that is, ho? That girl is a tomboy. That girl is a tomboy. That girl is a tomboy. Who that is, ho? That girl is a tomboy. That girl is a tomboy. That girl is a tomboy. Who that is, ho? That girl is a tomboy. That girl is a tomboy. That girl is a tomboy.